Brian, the new Congress convenes in Washington. The White House will be preparing for a battle with the Republican Party and its control of the House.
But the GOP has plans to expand its new power even more by using an arcane law to its advantage. Brian Beutler is a reporter for Talking Points Memo, and he joins us tonight from Washington. Brian has spoken with several lawmakers about their plan to use the Congressional Review Act to force veto after veto by President Obama. Brian, good to have you with us.
Thank you both for having me.
Hi, Brian. So this all sounds a little convoluted. Tell us how the law would work.
Let me do my best. Okay. So the way the law works is that it allows, by a simple majority vote in the Senate, no filibuster, Congress, both the House and the Senate, to pass what's known as a resolution of disapproval of any executive branch regulation or rulemaking. So if Republicans decided that they deeply oppose this new health care regulation that will incentivize doctors to have end-of-life counseling with their patients, or the Volcker rule, or environmental regulations, they can force votes in both the House and the Senate on those regulations. And if the resolution of disapproval passes, with the help maybe of some Democrats who'd have to take tough votes, then that resolution goes to President Obama's desk, and he either has to veto it or sign it.
But so the point is more or less for the party of no to force the president to become the president of no and veto all these pieces of legislation.
That's correct. I think it's also to widen schisms that already exist within the Democratic Party, to try to force vulnerable members and maybe members that aren't on the same page with the White House on these regulatory issues to basically step on the other side of the aisle and join the Republicans against the president.
Well, I think that there's a larger aspect to this, which is that having lost the House, the common theory is that President Obama will now govern to a great extent through the regulatory process. So the executive branch always has the power to issue regulations subject to legal challenge. Now what you're saying is that these will be subject to legislative challenge, so even his regulatory power will be checked by a Republican Party, even though he might veto it. There's going to be another significant pressure brought to bear on every one of these individual regulations if they pursue this policy.
That's exactly right. That's very well put.
And now, here's my question. Have you spoken to, who on the Hill have you spoken to who says they will be pursuing this, and what are the regulations they intend to go after first?
Well, so I spoke specifically to Senator Jim DeMint, who's sort of a leader on the conservative wing of the Republican Party, and I spoke to Senator Lindsey Graham, who's from his same state. On the other wing of the party, I've spoken to aides about this. I've spoken to consultants about this. This is something that they certainly are looking at doing. I think what triggered it for me as far as looking into it was this new FCC regulation on net neutrality. As soon as it came out, 30 Republicans were there signing a letter saying that they oppose it and that they plan to or suggesting that they might force one of these votes next Congress on that issue. And 30 is the magic number that they need to force that floor vote, to get to the Senate floor, where they would only need a majority to pass a resolution of disapproval. So they signaled, just a week ago or so, that this is something that they're really strongly looking at.
Well, so who do you see as some of the Democrats who might be vulnerable to this kind of thing?
Ben Nelson is basically the most conservative Democrat in the Senate. He's also up for re-election in 2012. Claire McCaskill, she's a moderate. She's also up in 2012. I think that you could see a few more defections, maybe Mary Landrieu. This is just me speculating based on voting records in the 111th Congress. But there's definitely, they would need about 4 for all of these if they keep all the Republicans united. And unless Harry Reid draws a really tough line on this, they could pretty easily get that.
So what you really have now is a third Republican strategy. Obviously, you can repeal a law, which is something that would be hard but has been talked about in terms of health care in particular. You can defund certain efforts on the part of the executive branch, which is something they've spoken about. And now what you're doing is laying out a third potential strategy where you actually go after each individual regulation. So there's really, this is another arrow in the quiver of the Republican Party that wants to push back against the president's agenda.
That's right, that's right. And it's something that they're aware probably won't have any actual regulatory impact. That it's more about messaging, and it's more about broadcasting the American people or their base what they see as problems with the White House's governing within the executive branch. But as one Republican consultant put it to me, it's sort of like message voting on steroids. That often there are test votes on amendments and things like that happen in the House and the Senate that they're supposed to have a big political import, and then they never really do. These are going to be sort of bigger because they're really going to spotlight how Obama's governing, and they're going to force him to either sign or veto. And it's a question of how many they do and how much the conservative media and also the mainstream media kind of gloms onto this and treats it as a real issue as opposed to just sort of a sideshow.
So, Brian, we shouldn't be holding our breath in anticipation for the new bipartisan Congress.
I wouldn't put money on it, but but I'm not a betting man.
All right. Brian Boyler, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you both for having me.
When we come back, after all the talk about